Today I wanted to let you know, talk about inventions that changed our lives. In this section, we're going to point out inventions that changed the world and particularly changed and improved health and medical practices. Number one was refrigerator. Refrigerator was invented in 1834. It wasn't mass produced till early 1900, where people were moving into the urban environment. The early refrigerator was very poisonous and killed a large number of people because of poisonous fume and gas that was in it. Actually, Einstein and his friend was reading an article about number of people who died, and him and his friend decided to come up with a compressor that kept the gas inside and created a valve. Later on, of course, the refrigeration technology changed and changed the gas, but however, Einstein's invention was used later on in the fuel injection of the rockets. People tried to invent things such as coffee percolators or toasters to make their life easy. Some inventions such as circular saw was very, very helpful, being able to cut down forests and trees, increased tremendously to logging, and urban to develop lots of housing, and homes were built by wood. That's why in early 1900, many of the cities burned because got on fire because the structure was all wood. A dentist, an African American dentist in New Orleans, invented a silk dental floss, and he actually packaged it and sold it. Sewing machine was invented first and called it lock and stitch. The guy who invented it came up with a needle that could actually do the stitch, but he couldn't really make a machine out of it. Later on, a guy called Singer, as you all remember the Singer sewing machine, he was able to mass produce it and basically invented it. Bicycle was invented, but actually bicycle wasn't invented for riding. As you all know, I'm a cyclist, and I call it sometimes a bike snob, and this is a book that is written the history of bicycles. The first bicycle, it was called Die Loaf Machine. It didn't have the wheels. Basically, your legs were your wheels, and you had wheels, but your pedals were your feet, and you went much faster than a horse. But later on, of course, the bicycle became very, very popular. Wealthy people rode bicycles, and then all bicycle seats were invented, and women were able to ride bicycles, and urban cities and cities were expanded mainly because bicycling and cycling. Many towns in New York, they built bicycling paths before they actually put roads in, because that was early before the automobile. Rubber tire was invented by Dunlop, but Goodyear was the one who actually was able to use vulcanization to make tire much more elastic and use popular, and he patented and made millions of dollars out of that. Pencil was very, very important invention, because when I was a child we didn't have pencil. Prior to that we used ink, but later on they were able to use graphite and rocks and be able to process it in a way that turned into a pencil. Before we had inks, and that was extremely popular invention, allowed a lot of people to be able to articulate and do extensive writing. Train and steams and locomotives were invented, opened up the roads and transportation, and opened the rural area to the urban environment. I was very impressed to know that New England Journal of Medicine was put together in first journal was put together, published in 1812. Remember, around 1850, we have many, many infectious diseases, outbreaks of many diseases, typhoid, we had smallpox, we were just affected children, we had polio. So the era and people are dying from infection more so than are dying from the surgery. So the invention of Lester coming up with anesthesia, ether, these are all the method of anesthesia, and he was able to use carbolic acid to wash everything. During that time, as you remember, the Florence Nightingale was also looking into the infection, and after they found out that many of the soldiers were dying due to the septic sewer next to them, they made a connection. There's a connection with the sewer, with the filth, and the disease. The Chadwick Report and the Shattuck Report, both from England and United States, changed the era from not knowing what causes disease to what we call the sanitary era. I want to talk a little bit about the epidemiology. Prior to epidemiology, most people, of course, knew about the statistics. But the person who really did the first clinical study was James Lind. He basically came up with a report called limeys. He was able to use lime and scurvy to determine whether vitamin C causes scurvy among soldiers and sailors. He divided the sailors into groups. He gave a group double limes and fresh fruit. The others he didn't, and those who didn't, they died. And later on, of course, Snow was able to correlate the water and how it affected the water system in London, and connected and epidemiologically detailed with a detailed map, plotted the cases, and was able to show the intensity, duration of disease within different pumps, and knowing where contamination was. Joseph Bazalgette was very well known. He's one of the heroes of sewer. He was the one. These old big cities were all fueled and fouled by sewer smell, and Bazalgette was the one who basically came up with the best sewer system in London that still exists. In Pasteur and Koch, these people in the latter part of the 1800s were able to actually provide evidence that bacteria and little tiny organisms basically cause diseases. With the invention of automobile and Civil War occurring in 1861, most soldiers, most people died from wounds, and it was World War I, for example. During that time, most people died from amputation and neck than any other thing. So understanding this era of antiseptic bacteria and how diseases are affected, simultaneously urbanization, cities are growing like mad. At the same time, population congregating in infectious diseases, and measurements such as quarantine was extremely highly practiced to make sure to isolate cases. So once these transportation and cities were opened up, public health measures become utmost important. Inventions of parachute, for example, saved thousands of soldiers when they were getting severely burned. Hopkins came up with the idea of vitamins, knowing that there are other things besides the minerals that affects and chemicals that affects our body. You know, during Titanic in 1912, we were able to have the technology to build one of the largest ships. We didn't have the sonar system. Sonar system came up after the scientists thought about how to prevent the rocks and the snow under the water that could affect the ships. Ford did not invent automobile, but he was the first one who actually came up with the concept of assembly line, which we believe he stole the idea from George Carver. The silence movie came about. The lie detector machine was invented. The first lie detector invention proved was at UC dormitory at the UC Berkeley, tried to find out who was the guilty one. Chainsaw electric shavers came up. I remember within people, it's very hard for them to shave, and Gillette came up with a razor blade, in which was very effective in being able to allow soldiers to shave, so they'd be able to put the gas mask on their faces and seal them. So every soldier received a Gillette packet. He went through really hard time to find it. Wonder Bread, the whole idea came up when he was watching balloons up in the sky and he saw different colors, and he came up with the Wonder Bread idea, and there's a whole story behind it. Park movement came about once automobile was available and trained. People want to go to the national amenities, and of course the park movement is a tremendous movement against not allowing automobiles in the park. Penicillin was invented 1934, was extremely helpful in Second World War II, and streptomycin was other kinds of products that were used against tuberculosis, which was a deadly disease those days. World War II, it was between 1934 and 1945. As you know, after World War II, polio vaccine, mass-producing product as such. Penicillin was the first one that governments in U.S. and London and Great Britain got together to mass-produce them. So during Eisenhower, during 50s and 70s, many organization infrastructure in public health was put together. Department of Health and Human Services was 53, Self Vaccine was 54, oral contraceptive came in 1961, which transformed the lives of women around the world. Office of Occupational Health and Safety Administration, Environmental Protective Agency, Health and Educational Welfare, and Smoker Eradication all occurred in the 1970s. Elevator allowed us to be able to build high rises. Antiseptic was able to allow us to do surgery. Vacuum cleaner was able to clean indoor air. Indoor plumbing allowed people, as I said, to live in high rises and be able to use fresh water. Contraception was allowed again, like birth control, allow women to have much more freedom in choices of birth. Pencil and canning was extremely helpful in allowing people to save and variety of different food for a long period of time in the United States. Today we have about 6,000 drugs, 2,500 surgical procedures, and 1,500 non-surgical procedures. We are in a very extensive and complex world, and prevention is extremely important. The health of a nation is the wealth of a nation. And as you know, you're never too old to ride. Have a good day. Bye.